All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Lyons and Councilor Hanson. Both are excused absences. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So. Mr. Chairman, before we get going tonight, I'd like to add one item to the agenda. We'll make it item number 19. The police cruiser bids have come in.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adding this as an item? Unanimous. Item 3, rules of order. We follow Robert's Rules of Order and any other rules that we adopt during the organizational meeting. Item 4, adoption of minutes from the following meetings of the Ellsworth City Council, 6/20/2022, regular council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item 5, city manager's report. Manager Mosier.
Good evening. I have several things to report out on tonight. First off, we have a workshop scheduled, a joint workshop for next Monday night, the 25th, between you all and the planning board to discuss the current solar moratorium and efforts to bring that to a close coming up in October. City Hall will be closing at 12 noon on August 12th. It's a Friday for the annual employee appreciation cookout, which you're all invited to as well, and that will be at the Harbor Park. The broadband committee has wrapped up and come forward with a roadmap and strategic plan. It's available on the city website, and we encourage citizens to go on and take a look at that and report back any concerns, questions, comments that you may have prior to August 8th. Currently in City Hall here, we are conducting a toy drive for the month of July, and those toys will be stored here at City Hall, and then come holiday season, they will be donated out to needy children in the area, in our community, and the toys can be dropped off here at City Hall, and we're also accepting monetary donations as part of that toy drive. Water and sewer bills can now be paid at the wastewater treatment plant. And the summer concert series on Wednesdays and Fridays at Harbor Park has kicked off, along with the first performance of Shakespeare in the Park on July 22nd and 23rd at 7 p.m. and on July 24th at 4 p.m. And that is all that I have, sir.
Questions or comments?
Will that be on the city website as well?
The performances of Shakespeare?
Yeah, just the times.
Yes, I believe so. I will make sure that it is if it's not.
All right. Item 6, committee reports. Any councilors attend any committees? Seeing that. So we do have one update this evening on the committee that we established a while ago, and this is for the HCTC in terms of looking at that. So I will turn it over to Jake. There you are. I didn't look before. I didn't know if you were here, Jake. I was getting there.
Present. Yes, so tonight we wanted to come in and give the council an update on where we stand on the building study that was completed. And Tyler and Sarah from Oak Point Associates are going to come up and give the full report and kind of talk us through that whole thing. But just to give hopefully a really brief history in just kind of foundation and background on that whole thing for anyone who's new or not totally up to speed with it. Ellsworth Business Development Corporation in roughly 2018 had completed a couple of projects and was starting to kind of sit back and look at what are the areas of need in greater Ellsworth. And at this time, the workforce crisis was really starting to build. So that was kind of driving a lot of our conversations, and we took that and said, okay, so what can we do as Ellsworth Business Development Corporation? What can we do that would have a significant impact for all the stakeholders in Ellsworth, not just businesses, not just employees, but what's something that we could really focus our energy on that would have an impact across the board? And one of the things we kept coming back to was Hancock County Technical Center. The school's been around physically for a long time. In the programs up there in CTE in general has just gained a lot of steam in the last 10 years. And it parlays directly into what we all experience every single day in our local communities. And it definitely can be a value add to any community having a vibrant technical school that's helping train people with the local needs that are necessary. So we spent a lot of time talking about it, thinking about it, spent time physically up there looking at the campus, spending time with Amy, talking to her about the things that she sees on a day-to-day basis, and what are the needs? So how can we enhance this here? In almost all the conversations came back to the building or space, whether it was building deficiencies or just simply spaces just being too small. So we spent lots and lots of time going through that, talking about it, and really we came back to the first step in the process of seeing what we could do about that is taking an inventory of what's there and basically having a building study done to see what is the best way to improve that. And that's, in a couple of minutes, Sarah and Tyler are going to come up and present the final study and the completion and what that final data said. But to back up 1 second, part of this really got stemmed from it would have been 2016 or 2017, the superintendent's office applied to be put on the construction schedule, on the state's construction schedule to build a new school. And the results of that were basically HCTC landed in the middle teens. I think it was 13 or 14 where it landed. Given the financial allocation that was put forth for that year's construction cycle, which, and it's not a yearly thing, but just that allotment, that period's construction cycle, with our math that we did, it was probably going to be 15 to 25 years before ground would have been broken. That's most likely too long, and there would be significant deficiencies that would happen in that time period, let alone the inability to keep up with the increased enrollment. So that's what kind of got us thinking about all of this. The first step is to find out what we have and see what it's going to take to kind of modernize that whole facility and kind of get that up to speed with just what the demands are for that now. So with that, I'll ask Tyler and Sarah to come up. And I'll add too, this was this committee was built as a joint committee with the school board, the superintendent's office, city council, and Ellsworth Business Development Corporation. So all entities have members on this joint board that's executed the work so far. So with that, Tyler and Sarah from Oak Point and Associates.
And before you begin, I just wanted to also remind the different composition of the council and the public that the city allocated, I think it was $125,000 towards this effort and initiative in terms of being able to do this. So that's why it's important to be able to see what the result of that work is and where it stands at this point.
While they're setting up, Councilor Chair, I just wanted to remind you, we had spoken at Finance Committee about the forming of an additional committee for public safety building. So we're going to mention that, so after this.
He appears and then he disappears.
It's mystical.
And then the magic.
All right. Well, thank you. We're excited to be here to report back on about a year and a half worth of work on this project. We've had a really great experience with your advisory committee that we've been working with, and some really good support from Amy and her staff, as well as we've moved through a pretty robust information gathering session. So, quick introductions. My name's Tyler Barter. I'm a principal architect with Oak Point, and this is Sarah Smith. She is one of our interior designer, also a principal and educational planner with the firm. So, for those that don't know who we are an architecture and engineering firm based out of Biddeford, and we've been working collectively on school projects around the state for the past 25 years or so. A lot of experience in this realm, which we've been able to utilize throughout this process. We're about 73 people strong, and we have all of the disciplines that were needed for this entirety on the project, all under one roof. So all the architecture and engineering that were involved in both the facilities assessment portion and also the educational planning side. So a little bit about the process that we underwent. When I mentioned that there was a pretty robust data collection part, it really was. So we had the opportunity to speak to all of the individual staff at the school. We spent about an hour to hour and a half with each of the individual groups. We met with the advisory committee, and then they actually set up some liaison meetings with advisory groups for each of the individual programs. We were able to get out, tour some facilities in town that were experiencing some of these labor shortages that I think the hope that this school can help to address in the future, which really gave us a lot of great input and a lot of very thoughtful comments and feedback as we started to look what the overall space planning needs of this facility were. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we get into it, that there really are a lot of needs that this greater community felt that an enhancement in the HCTC program would be able to provide in both the short and the long-term staffing areas. So that process took about a 6-month period where we met with the groups. We started to put together some of that preliminary data, and then we started to test it as well. So we'd bring it back, meet with the advisory group, meet with Amy and her staff to start to really nail down what those individual program needs were and how the building either was or wasn't addressing those programs currently. From there, we started to take a look at the early phase of bubble diagrams. So starting to mass out what the physical relationships of these different components were, and then how we could start to organize those into a proposed floor plan. From there, again, we started to really work on that feedback loop. So you see the kind of the arrows between that yellow and the blue tab, and that really was an iterative process. So we would bring back thoughts and ideas. We'd get a lot of great feedback. We'd make some adjustments, come back and start to test it. And we really didn't move on to that final presentation that's in the report submitted in January until everyone was really in agreement that we kind of hit that sweet spot on a respectable amount of square footage that was appropriate to both the overall building programs for the current, but also planning out what those needs are for the future. And from there, we submitted the draft facilities assessment report and the overall building plans and budgets in January. So the existing building, I think, I'm not sure how many are aware of all of the pieces that go into it, but it's about a 36,000 square foot building. When we did the facilities assessment analysis for the second time, we did an update on the one that we had done back in 2013. We found that a lot of great things had happened with a new roof, windows, and some boiler work that was ongoing. But the building really has somewhat limited ability to continue in its function without some major investment. So we're seeing a lot of code analysis challenges. So there's some fire separations. There's a lot of challenges with accessibility throughout the building, an elevator that's exceeded its useful life, a lack of sprinkler system in the building, which is especially critical with a lot of the programs that you're housing in there with an early childhood education center and a vehicle maintenance program. So you have diesel, automotive, and all of these other components that have a somewhat higher risk. So making sure that those things are addressed in any project. Making sure that all those occupancies are separated by code-approved systems. And then continuing to build on the work that you've been doing over the years with replacements and upgrades of the building system. So making sure that you have good ventilation, the heating systems are modernized, and a lot of those things are going to be very challenging as you start to move through that overall building process. We also noticed that there are a number of structural issues that you'll see throughout the report if you have a chance to take a peek. And some of those are just based on the way that the building was constructed in the time that it was. So updates to the current building code have left it in a place where it met original design requirements, doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of a new building today. So before I turn this over to Sarah, what we did was we put together a summary of all of the programs that you'll see in the building and a number of programs that are planned or being introduced to the facility in the coming years. So one of the things that you'll notice right off the bat, based on this chart behind me, is that with a 36,000 square foot building plus about 6,000 to 10,000 square feet located off campus, the building's right around 40% of the size that it would need to be to meet all of the growing demands. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the report that we put together, is just the amazing amount of education that's happening in a somewhat small footprint. So being able to turn out the quality education there, but really not being able to expand those programs to meet those growing needs and a lot of the challenges and changes that are happening in education as we move forward. With that, I will turn it to Sarah to talk a little bit about the space programming.
Thanks, Tyler. So as Tyler mentioned, we have this graph that we put together for you to take a look at. And one of the things that we did use as a testing tool was to test it against the state standards. So the state has a document that they put out what they recommend for sizes for different programs, for all the way from pre-K to through upper school. And so that the numbers that we have here are also reflective upon what the state standards are too. So we were using that and balancing that with the programs that are at the school as well, that when we interviewed. So the way that they do some of their programs are a little bit different than the state, but it was a good number to start with. And what you can see here, so this is when Tyler was talking about bubble diagrams, this is when we start designing and really just looking at spatial needs and what their adjacencies are. And we did that for each one of the programs. So here you see culinary arts. On the left-hand side is their existing space, and then in the bubble diagrams you see what the new space looks like to support the programs that they have. And this is pretty typical of every program within the school. Same thing with multimedia. You can see what the existing is, and then comparing that to what state standards are for a new multimedia. If they were going to build, say, what they did in Stanford High School or something like that, that's the type of space that they're recommending for these programs. What happens in the school that you have now, it's mostly just classroom space and barely any lab space or breakout space or small group learning spaces that you see in today's pedagogy. So that's why the floor plans are so much bigger. When you start giving that space that has the lab space and some of these breakout areas, it really is a lot different today than it was when the school was first constructed. So we did these for every one of the programs with this bubble diagram and the adjacency needs. And for this, we're just going to show a couple of them. If we want to get into every floor plan, we can walk through them, but I think this kind of gives you a picture of what we're talking about for space needs. We then looked at two different options. So what if we renovated the building and did it as a phased project, and then also a completely new building on the same site, and so that the school could continue in progress while the new building was being constructed. What you see here is a renovation of the existing floor plan. The dashed area in yellow, that shows the existing building of what you have now. Because the building is on a sloped area, you have part of it that would be put down at the lower part and be the main entrance area, and the upper portion would have an addition that goes on it that would house the automotive and diesel program. So it would be sort of a tiered addition, one on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side. So you can see on the in the blue area there, the main entrance space. I don't know if I can do it with a, let's get a pointer. Oh, there you go. So in our scheme for this one, we have the main entrance up by that blue area. We would have a controlled main office space with a secure entry, which you don't really have a good setup now. They can't really see the main entrance as well. So we have that in the front entrance. Off to the left-hand side, we would have the dining and kitchen and culinary arts with an outdoor function area. And these, the sizes of some of these things in the area where they're located came out of some of the interview process that we did. Having the knowledge base that there's not a lot of space in this area for meetings or for workforce training. We developed a space that could be right at the front for outside vendors and such to come in and to be able to use that space and keep it separate from the school. The other program that would be added into that phase there is early childhood program with its own separate entrance from in the back and its own play space out to the back. In the existing building, we have video production, the welding lab, and building trades, being able to utilize some of the base space that's already there. So we try to be really thoughtful of what is existing in the building today and what spaces would go back into those areas in a thoughtful manner as far as reconstruction and being able to isolate things within the building. Up on the upper portion, we have the, up above, we try to do spaces again that would be used by the public. So areas with computer labs and such that could be used for workforce training and still be able to isolate that part of the building from the rest of the building as public access. We also have the law enforcement, biomedical, health occupations off to the right-hand side, and then on the upper portion, new diesel and automotive labs. Those are the pieces that are, for us, code-wise, having those in the existing building is really troubling. So we were able to pull those out and get them sized properly and have bays that you could get in and out of in a safe manner, which right now it's a little tricky the way that they're all in that space. And these are the blow-up areas, but we kind of went through that, so we'll skip ahead. Todd's going to talk about the site plan and how that would work.
So as Sarah had mentioned, one of the challenges on this site was some of the natural topography as we're transitioning with a roughly 14-foot grade drop from the kind of the main level entrance now to the back. And those are some of the things that were challenging on the accessibility side. And that really led to some of the changes in the vehicular circulation to make that new entrance and then the dedicated drop-off area for the parent drop-off for the early childhood education work. So we've utilized some of the existing curb cuts, looped around to the back on our circulation, but then also gave a dedicated main entrance with a visitor lot that directed everyone into one secure entrance, as Sarah had mentioned, was something that we felt was really important. Some of the challenges that we have on the site is that there are a fair number of wetlands, some intermittent streams that we have to kind of work around in some of those areas, and you'll see some of that reflected with both the kind of that magenta and blue dash line, some of the setbacks that we're trying to work around. Making sure that we've provided enough vehicle storage space for the diesel and automotive programs is important, making sure that those were both secure and appropriately sized to meet all of the accreditation guidelines. And then also making sure that we're providing enough staff and student parking. We know that there's a lot of transient action on this site with students driving from other communities, busing from other communities. So making sure that the vehicular circulation works really well was important. So that led to the new lot here in the front for visitors, staff lot, and then an ability to add additional parking toward the rear of the site for either students and staff, depending on where they're located within the building. This is a diagram of how this building would be put together massing. So this isn't intended to be, necessarily an exact replica of what it would look like, but kind of give you an idea on how the physical relationship of both the new and the existing are working together. So this is a bird's eye view looking from that upper area with the natural slope that exists now down to the two-story addition in the back. And then you can see, appropriately sized, well-defined entrance that will be kind of the main gathering point, one-directed area. And then working your way back up all of the public functions in this area, as Sarah had mentioned, the ability to utilize this facility in the evenings, in the weekends, for all of these workforce housing, workforce development programs that are happening. The ability to rent this out for community events and functions was really a critical thing throughout the process. And then moving up to some of those high bay spaces that are on the upper level that will house the diesel and the automotive. One thing that we liked about this plan, if you do pursue a renovation option, is the ability to phase this. So you can construct either one of these additions with some renovations to that middle section and build this out over time if that was a direction that you decided to take. This is a view looking at it from the opposite side, so you can see the repurposing of those lower level where carpentry was formerly held and the automotive areas being that connection point for the addition, and then that dedicated entrance for the Early Childhood Education Center right over here. Talk about the new.
So the next option we looked at is what if we do a new building? And again, as Tyler mentioned, the site's a little bit difficult, so we had to really work with the site to see what kind of shapes and vehicular traffic we could get and still stay within the boundaries and the setbacks that the site has. Again, we're set up very similar as far as the adjacency needs in the new building as we were in the renovation model, just because that's the design directive that we're trying to get all the appropriate adjacencies together. So it's the same type of setup. If you see where that dashed line is on the plan, I'm going to pull up larger plans so you can see how it breaks out. So this is the main entrance here. Again, the green is the admin space, the dining and culinary arts would be off to the right, early childhood off to the left-hand side, and then some academic classrooms and computer labs in such in that main sort of thoroughfare, if you will. And again, that we did that purposely so that it could be isolated. Those are the spaces that would be most used by the public, and we could close the rest of the building off and really have that be as a function for the entire community. On the upper side, that's the second floor. That would be right above that. And again, the medical classrooms, law enforcement, video production. So again, very repetitive of what we did before, but within the new building space. This is that back part of the building. What we did here in the way that these were constructed, off to the right-hand side is automotive and diesel, but onto the left-hand side we have marine and welding, and we purposefully placed those there because those programs are currently located off-site at a different location. They're very successful there. So if we were going to duplicate or move something, we made that so that piece can be added on later on if that was the choice to be made, but it made it a really great spot to be able to add on later. In the brown, you'll see there's a light tan color. That's a building trades lab. That one is one that is set forth to be more of a flexible space. So not knowing what the programs are and how they change throughout the years, all of the labs will be set up to be kind of universal and be able to be changed around for different programs as the need comes. And that was kind of a direction that we were given for a bunch of the larger spaces, making them really flexible for the future so that as programs come and go, they can be adjusted really simply for that. And here you can see, I'm going to give it to Tyler for the site.
So this one, we've left the existing building on as a reference point here in the front, so to give you a little bit of context on where we're looking at the site. So one of the challenges would be kind of that stream crossing to begin. So making sure that we've left in some adequate space for kind of limited crossings, being able to do some of that engineering, leaving some really good areas for stormwater treatment so that we're taking care of all of those things without impacting the natural resources of the site. We've taken a very similar approach to this one as well. So we've got a dedicated bus and parent drop-off at the front, a place for a dedicated visitor lot, and then pushed a lot of the parking more toward the back in the sides on this one with staff and student parkings on either side of the site. And then in the back, we've got a parking area that would serve for the vehicles, for the automotive and diesel trades. And then also there's a couple that law enforcement has as well. So it's really given us a really good opportunity here to kind of nestle this into the back side of the site on land that the city already owns, which is, I think, advantageous for a lot of reasons. As Sarah had mentioned, that wing has been kind of set off to the side, so if you decide to co-locate or duplicate a program, you have that ability, or if that's chosen not to be constructed in that first pass, then you have the ability to expand with some more high bay space as different programs are identified as you move forward. So kind of thinking about that, both short-term and long-term flexibility of the site. So this one has a similar but slightly different approach where we can have a traditional two-story building in the front. We're thinking that this would be something that we would make one universal main floor, really try to work with the existing topography and not have to kind of step up and down too much. It makes the flow a lot easier through the building for students and staff, and then makes it a lot more straightforward as you're kind of traversing the parking and circulation areas on that main part of the site. Again, this works with the dedicated main entrance. That's really your focal point, becomes your secure entrance. And then we've kind of pushed some of those high bay spaces toward the back. That way we're able to utilize that front for event space. We've got some hardscape in the budget, those types of things to really make this a desirable location for a lot of different events. And here's some looks at what the high bay spaces are in the back. From there, what we ended up doing is we put together project budgets for the two options and then kind of a hypothetical off-site improvement piece. Another considerably, similar type of site, flat context, something that we could look just to kind of get an idea of what the orders of magnitude would be if we had to start working in additional utilities and site work and other things to kind of give you kind of that full range of our overall building projects. And we came up with these three different options that are all fairly close in price, but do offer some distinct differences. So the renovation option, and I'll say these were put together kind of in late 2021. So as we all know, the construction market and inflation in general has been pretty rampant. So we're thinking that there's somewhere in a 7 to 10% increase from the time that these were put together, just for context. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that you had kind of that clear picture of apples to apples going through this process. The first one up on the renovation ended up with a just under $53 million project at the time. It looks very similar to that new construction line next to it, but the one key difference here is that we weren't physically able to house the marine trades program on site if that was something that was, a desired output from the end. So there's about a 6,000 square foot difference in the plan, which is about a $4 million increase in the total project budget. Moving forward on that new construction line, again, just under $53 million, but that includes the full marine trade and welding, which may or may not be here. So it does give you some ability to kind of adjust that up and down based on what the final program ends up being. We took a look at a hypothetical site, off-site, something that could be close to some other shared facilities, such as the high school or closer to town, and made some assumptions on what that would look like with building access roads, extending sewer, water, three-phase power, all those infrastructure needs in, which you can see is a pretty significant increase. And I think this was something that when we started looking and saw the numbers, maybe wasn't as advantageous long-term for the community, but was something that was good context-wise. One thing that isn't included in there would be any potential land acquisition costs. So that's something to keep in mind, that this number is assumption that the parcel would be owned or gifted to the city. So there are assumptions in there that could sway this pretty significantly depending on what that parcel ends up being. And this is a more in-depth project budget that's included in the report that breaks down how these numbers are arrived at. So we've tried, as we did with the overall facilities planning piece, tried to make sure that we're following as close to the state process as we can, set you up that you're in good position if that funding does come around, or understanding if you decide to do something locally, how this breaks down. So we've got the construction line, all the administrative costs and reserves, which continues all the land acquisition, and it has the furniture, fixtures, technology, and then also the contingencies for the project. So making sure that we have a healthy bid contingency for some of those market fluctuations, and then also a construction contingency for things that naturally come up. And then Part C is all of the fees and breakdown of the permitting process and administrative side of the project. So this gives you kind of the full picture of how those bottom line numbers are arrived at. That's the end of our presentation, and hopefully we've left enough time for questions and answers.
Can you go back to the proposed estimated cost?
What, the big or the?
Yeah, that one. And would you read the bottom lines? I can't read them from here.
Oh, sure. So
Please.
starting from the left-hand column, that's the renovation option.
Yeah,
The bottom total is $52,907,000.
62?
52,
Okay.
sorry. The one next to it is new construction on the existing site, and that's $52,978,500. And new construction on a new site is somewhere in that $57.7 million. And again, with that renovation option, it doesn't include the marine trades, which if we had a way to get it on the site, would be about $4 million more. So based on this first analysis, it looks like new construction on the existing site is the most financially agreeable path forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So just comment, as being a part of the committee, I think where this started, obviously, huge numbers, and everybody sees those numbers and kind of probably take gasps a bit.
Swallows hard.
Yeah, but in terms of keeping in mind the long-term reality on a couple levels, this started as a private-public partnership, which it would continue to be, so that number would hopefully be reduced dramatically in terms of having that public side. Going to what Jake was talking about in terms of workforce development, the reality that the HCTC program provides a pathway for students that is really important, and that we could leverage more relationships with other post-secondary systems to develop and train workforce to go into areas where the people just haven't been going into. We seem to have fallen, I think personally, as a society, of pushing students in one direction, the pathway of college, and we're seeing that we don't have enough trades. So for a community, there's the opportunity for that investment to develop. And the cost is important to have to understand where it takes us. It doesn't mean that we should just reject it out of hand because it's a large price tag. I think the next step that the city should support is moving forward in terms of, well, how do we get there? How do we make this affordable and realize this so that it doesn't have that negative cost impact? If that's all you want to look at, then this will never happen. But if we look at it for what it can be and what it should be, then we start to come up with some solutions. And I think that's the work that lies ahead, and to continue to engage the public, the different groups that have been part of this. The opportunities are there, but I think the worst thing we could do as a city is just kind of say, well, it costs too much, let's move on to something else. Because then we're not going to have that public-private opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is that there's also the potential, by having this plan and having an understanding about what we want to achieve, that we can have discussions with Augusta in the hopes that maybe our project gets moved up. Maybe we do get the funding. That just because we were 13 originally doesn't mean that we can't move up on that list and have those opportunities. So I think this was a really an important first step, and I hope that as a city and as a council, we support an effort to keep this at the forefront and keep this moving forward. Council Miller.
And now that we have numbers, we should also be searching for grants. If they will not move us up on the list, we should search as a city. The chamber can search, the Heart of Ellsworth can search, because they all have access to different grants, and see what they can come up with now that we have numbers.
Councilor Hill.
I have a couple of questions. What is the square footage of your new construction?
Both the renovation and the new end up right around 96,000 square feet.
Okay. And right now you have around,
The existing building is 36,000 at this footprint, and I think about
another-
10,000 off-site, about 4 in Bucksport for the welding and another 6 over at MDI for the marine trades.
I'd just like to echo a comment you made that, sure, it looks scary, but this is the future of our young people. Can't just run.
Oh, please.
So another one of the thought process that went through EBDC, and after we started talking with Tyler and Sarah, is we kind of started cracking the door open to the potential for grants, philanthropy, and just looking at creative funding sources to be able to kind of mitigate some of that big scary number. And one of the things that became very apparent quickly after we started looking into that is both on the philanthropy side and grants, they need to see something, and on the grant side, the more shovel-ready, the more prep work that's done, the higher it puts you up the list. So that was one of the kind of leading factors in us really wanting to engage Tyler and Sarah and Oak Point and kind of getting this foundation piece done, at least to get this point, and we can build from there.
Any other questions, comments?
What do you think the participation rate would be with the other towns, since it is a county, Hancock County Technical College, or would it fall exclusively on Ellsworth?
Great.
Yeah. So, and we've had those discussions as well. And how it is currently set up is that school and the physical plant is owned by the city of Ellsworth. That doesn't mean that it completely shuts down any conversation with any other sending school or district or area. But how exactly that would work, and that conversation hasn't even started. But the raw data is that is an asset of the city of Ellsworth. So, I think that a lot of that, we'd have to get creative about how that would take a lot of conversation from a lot of different parties to figure out how to make that work.
I want to hear what Tyler was going to say, how he was going to answer that.
I was deferring to anyone else in the room.
Council Captain, please.
The other question is, looking at, since there's a biomedical sciences program, would either MDI Lab or the Jackson Lab, would they be willing to help with some of the funding?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the funding, but we were able to speak with folks at Jackson Lab, a lot of interest there. Two programs that were very excited on that medical side was both UMMA and Eastern Maine Community College. They are actually excited about the opportunity to share space. And you'll see, if you see some of the kind of the previous iterations, that's actually an area where we bumped up that square footage slightly to provide another simulation center and skills lab, so that both high school and college students could be training at the same time. So that was actually one of the programs I think that there was the most easily defined current partners that would be interested in continuing those discussions.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate
You're welcome.
it. So we will obviously bring this back to a future council meeting and talk about next steps and where we think it should go.
Can we get a printout of the presentation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd be happy to send that along.
All right. Just wait till. Yeah. All right, item 7, citizens' comment. This is a portion of the agenda where any citizen can comment on any item that you wish. If you'd like to do so, just step up to the podium, state your name, where you live, and you have approximately 3 minutes.
Right on time, Mr. Chairman.
Just as we planned.
I'm sitting at home in my recliner watching you folks. Mr. Blanchett, your addition to the agenda is illegal. 19A, you wanted to add to the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
Yes?
The Charter 205.B requires unanimous consent of 6 members. You have 5. You cannot add that to the agenda tonight by charter.
Okay.
Okay? I was sitting home watching it and realized you were doing something again against our charter. So I came down to inform you of it, so. 205B. You can consult with your clerk and make sure it's right, but I have a copy. So once again, you cannot add that to the agenda.
Well, next time, just say it with a smile, Gary. Don't be so P.O.
Have any of you ever read the charter?
Hey, Gary, if you want to speak, Gary, all
That's what I thought.
right, thanks, Gary. Anyone else like to speak?
Question, what should we do,
Anybody?
what should we do about that?
We'll
Yeah.
talk about it in a second. No one else wants to say.
We're still in citizens' comments.
We still are. That's why I said, we're still in citizen comment.
My name is Steve O'Halloran, and hopefully I can make this a little more friendly than the last one. My comment is about the position, not about the person. We've had a lot of discussions about conflict of interest. And I want to bring to the attention to everybody in this room, the city of Ellsworth and the council, that I feel we have a conflict of interest with having a city manager and a police chief in the same person. I realize that was, again, it's not about the person, it's about the position. Going through the budget process and watching that, I could see those conflicts there. There's a 3-year contract in place with our,
Mr. Chairman, this goes into personnel. That should come before a personnel committee.
may I continue?
And it should be a.
Thank you.
An agenda item in that committee, so that we aren't blindsided by anything.
At this point, we're treating it merely as citizens' comment, and it has the comments being made now do not reflect any opinion of the council. They're simply a comment being made by a citizen in the comment period. If this is ever going to be taken up, it needs to be put on the agenda as such.
Thank you. My point is this, is that there's a 3-year contract in place. We're a year and a half through it, and I would like the council and the city to consider, at the 3-year point, of dividing those two positions. I'm speaking to you as a citizen. I'm not asking for drastic measures. I'm asking to look forward. There's a year and a half left in the existing contract, and I would like the city to look at dividing those two positions. A separate city manager from a separate police chief. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? All right, seeing none, before moving to our next item, Madam Clerk, we're all set to, we cannot. Okay. So that item will not be added. We will have to take that matter up. However,
You have a workshop for the 25th, we can call a special council meeting prior to that workshop.
yes. And that's where it's going to go, is that we will just call a special meeting. Since we do have it next Monday, we'll do that immediately before the start of the workshop, and we will add that item. So we will have a special meeting to address this one item. And I would just say, on behalf of the council, it is in large part, as chair, my responsibility to know the rules, so I take responsibility for that. As far as sometimes the rules are complex, as many parts to our charter, so I appreciate Mr. Fortier keeping us on track and in line with that. We certainly want to operate appropriately. And I think we've all read the charter, however, it does get lost in the weeds sometimes, so that's what, what we, if anybody ever sees us acting in a way that's not in line, we want that feedback so that we can act appropriately. So we will add that to that meeting, and we'll take up that item then. Councilor O'Halloran.
Just a question. Because it was voted on to add, do you have to vote to remove it?
No, it's not, because it's not official, because we don't
can't
have,
vote.
we can't vote, so it just
Wasn't a vote.
automatically comes off, so. We can't vote to add it, and then we can't vote it to take it off, so. Because then if we vote to take it off, we're probably gonna be in
And what
trouble.
we were told is true, was been.
Yes, that's why I
checked.
checked with.
Okay, okay.
So. All right. Let's move on. Item 8, presentation of awards. Tree City USA Award and Arbor Day Foundation Program 2021.
Oh, coming up.
Yeah, my name is Tabitha White. I'm the chair of the tree committee for the Green Plan in Ellsworth. And this year, Ellsworth received the Tree City USA Award. We are the 20th city in the state of Maine to receive this award. We needed to meet certain criteria, having a tree border department, a community tree ordinance, a community forestry budget of at least $2 per capita, which includes volunteer time, and an Arbor Day proclamation. And some of those items that made us qualify for the budget, we actually hit $2.97 per capita. We had contracted maintenance for trees at Milton Park. We planted crab apples at City Hall, pruned crab apples at City Hall, and removed some, and as well as planted trees on High Street this year.
This is for us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and we'll have signs that are in the city. Just to make us more eligible for grant money for future tree plantings and tree maintenance in the future, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can we hang that in the tree warden's office?
Yes. That never gets old.
Never will.
All right, unfinished business, we have no unfinished business. Move on to the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk that considered to be routine will be acted by one motion. We only have one item, so we'll jump to that immediately. Item 9, Council Order Number 071800, request of the City Clerk for review and acceptance of the results from the July 12, 2022 City of Ellsworth School Budget Validation Special Municipal Referendum Election.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve acceptance of the July 12th, 2022 City of Ellsworth School Budget Validation Special Municipal Referendum Election results as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Council Caplan?
I'd just like to add that it would have been nice on the question if they included the dollar amount on the question at the time of the election, but it doesn't negate the will of the people, so.
Overwhelming.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. New business. Item 10, public hearing and action on the following business license applications. Madam Clerk, is everything in order for? And we have at least one new?
Is new. And the second to last, Timothy Wedge, is the owner.
So we have representatives for both?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Here we go. Take a deep breath. Ellsworth Lodge of Elks, number 2743, 317 High Street, for renewal of a city Class B licensed victual liquor and amusement, and renewal of a state club on premise with catering, malt, spirits, and vinous Class 1 liquor license. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. If anybody would like to comment on that, they may do so. If not, I will close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Fogtown Brewing Company LLC DBA Fogtown Brewing Company, 25 Pine Street, for renewal of a city Class B licensed victual liquor and amusement. That's public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Anybody wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Council Kaplan.
Has there been any movement on reducing the noise? And we've gotten some complaints in letters.
Manager Mosier, has there been any?
Nope. We haven't had any parking issues of late or noise complaints.
I brought this up once before, and last year, I believe, and nobody came to complain. I invited people to come.
Yes, they email us, but
Yeah.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Taste Jamaica LLC, 190 State Street for renewal of a city Class C license victual and liquor and renewal of a state restaurant Class 3 and 4 wine and malt liquor license. This is a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Anybody like to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Melanie Omler Fox, DBA Helen's Restaurant of Ellsworth, 55 Down East Highway, for renewal of a city Class C license, victular and liquor, and renewal of a state restaurant, malt, spiritus, and vinous Class 1, 2, 3, 4 liquor license. It's a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. No one wants to comment. Seeing none, close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Daniel C. Potts, DBA Lakeside Cedar Cabins, 397 Mariahville Road, for renewal of a city lodging license. This is a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Would anybody like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Zeppa's New York Pizza, 92 Water Street, for a new city Class C license, victular liquor, and new state liquor license. This is a new application, and we have the owner. So this public hearing, open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Would anybody like to speak? You don't have to. You're free to if you want to step up and speak.
I just want to say one thing, being totally new to Ellsworth, the staff here has been great to work with. They've helped me right off the turnip cart all the way through, so thank you very much. That's all I want to say.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Amanda Thurlow, DBA Demandas, 25 Eastwood Lane, for renewal of a city Class B victular arcade liquor and renewal of a state malt liquor license. It's a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Friends and Family Market, 390 State Street, for renewal of a city Class C victular and liquor and renewal of a state agency liquor license. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Anybody wish to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. The Butler did it. DBA Dragonfire Pizza, 248 State Street, for renewal of a city Class B arcade victular liquor and state malt liquor license. This is a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Any comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve?
No, go ahead.
Move to approve?
Second, but just a comment, I gotta give him 2 extra points for the business name.
Yeah.
It's clever.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Timothy Wedge, DBA The Break Room, 248 State Street, for a new city Class A licensed victular liquor arcade amusement and new state Class 11 liquor license. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. This is a change of ownership.
Change of ownership, change of name, with tags.
Okay. If anybody would like to comment? No?
There, right?
There is a rep.
Okay.
Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move approval.
Second?
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. And Pat's Pizza, Ellsworth, 396 High Street, for renewal of a City Class C license, victualler and liquor, and renewal of a state malt, wine, and spirituous liquor license. This is a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Anyone wish to comment? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Item 11, Council Order Number 071801, request of the Water Superintendent to enter into an agreement with Woodard and Curran for a preliminary treatment plan design and have the city manager sign all documents.
Good evening, Reggie Winslow, Water Department Superintendent. I will keep this brief. So the Water Department received a money through the State Drinking Water Program, the State Revolving Fund, for principal forgiveness, $300,000. And the study that Woodard and Curran will do is going to evaluate the treatment plant, evaluate different treatment processes.
Could you start over?
Yep.
Thank you.
So the State Revolving Fund, the main drinking water program, gave the Water Department $300,000 in principal forgiveness. Woodard and Curran is going to evaluate the treatment plant, the capacity, treatment processes, and the overall needs of water supply for the city. This will go in steps, but overall it's to redo or rebuild the existing plant. These are just concept designs. It'll tell us what we need to do, how much it's going to cost, and an overall timeline. And it is free. The $300,000 is free.
That's all you had to say. You had me
Just
at
want
three.
to, free.
You need to leave with that.
Questions, comments? Is there a motion?
Go ahead. I've got a blank screen.
Okay. Move to approve the request of the Water Department Superintendent to go into an agreement with Woodward and Curran for the preliminary design of the water treatment plant, which is to be funded by the Drinking Water Program State Revolving Fund in the sum of $300,000, and allow the city manager to sign the required documentation.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Discussion. We know, we've talked about this many, many times in terms of the state of the plant and
Yes.
the need to have plans and being able to get that design is certainly critical.
Yes.
Drinking water is not something we should be putting off, so and the fact that we have a resource to pay for it is definitely a bonus. Any other comments?
Now, before we vote, do we have to have a certain number of votes?
We need four of us to pass anything.
I'm just checking before we vote.
Fool me once. All those in favor? All those opposed? Passes.
Thank you.
Item 12, discussion of potential action to sell city-owned property.
So you've all been provided with a map. If you look in the packet of the information I gave you this evening, the piece parcel of land that was gifted to the city back in 1992. There's a citizen has approached the city with interest to purchase that parcel of land. It's a non-buildable approximately half acre, which is currently owned by the city as a result of that gift. And so I'm here tonight for two purposes. First of all, to get clarity from you all if you're interested in selling it. And then second of all, what the procedure you would like to follow as far as selling it. It's got an estimated property tax evaluation of $12,000. The piece of land is, if you look at the map, it's on 179 directly across from Skip Grendel's entrance to his gravel pit.
Councilor Kaplan.
What was the purpose of the gifting it in the first place?
Well, you have the paperwork in there. There wasn't any explicit directions given to the gifting of the property.
Was it a deed in lieu or anything like that?
Quick claim deed. There was more than one parcel. One of the other parcels was already sold off years ago, not anything that I was involved in. But in my understanding of that sale and purchases, the city manager agreed to a sale price to an individual who purchased the property.
This is an abutting landowner?
He is not, no. The gentleman is here,
Oh.
that has interest in the
There's
property.
actually 3 other properties that they had donated
If
to.
if you'd come up to the podium, please.
From my understanding, talking to old councilmen and trying to actually.
Wait a minute, I'm 65, where do you put me?
Well, Mr. Phillips.
He's my fault.
Yeah, from my understanding, previous to this time, about 15 years ago, was the last sale. They had other properties along Graham Lake that were all buildable. And the city councilman, where they were not taken for taxes, took and discussed a price with the person asking to buy them, and they came to an agreement and they sold them, not by bid buy, but his decision essentially. And I actually utilize this property for myself for hunting and do a lot of trash cleanup there. There's like a little turnaround that people back in and just dump their trash in all the time. And just myself out of frustration, I looked to see who owned it, to see if I could do something about it. Found out the town owned it, found out it was gifted back in '92. And just to look through the whole process of how can you purchase this, and if you could, and from my understanding, you can purchase it. And from everything I can read and find with everybody here, it's up to Mr. Mosier, if that's in you guys, if you'd like to. And like I said, it's not buildable. I'm simply gonna block off the little entrance that people pull in and dump stuff off of and utilize it for myself at that point. And
Councilor Kaplan.
Do other people utilize it for hunting?
I have seen one other person there, and the only thing I've ever seen is during migratory waterfowl season, there are a lot of birds that fly in and actually sit on the neighbor's lawn across the street. And what happens is they walk over and they stay on the left side. Well, to legally shoot, you have to be on the far right side of this property if you're going to meet all setbacks, whether it being the road, the neighbors, everything. You have to be on the far right side, almost the point. And the only person I've ever seen do that was actually a warden came up to me and said, "What are all these shells here?" And it's because people would pull in there and literally shoot from that one parking area at the birds that are right there, which is fully illegal shooting. He's just came up to me. He came up to us while we were in our blind and said, "Hey, are these your shells? We found some illegally shot birds." Checked all of us out. We use a very certain load and type of shell which you can't buy around here, so it's pretty evident to him that it wasn't us. But it's more or less to stop that from one, people just literally pulling in there and shooting, and two, trash dumping. I'm not saying that there's not anyone else. Me personally, I use it during the full migratory waterfowl season. Don't see footprints, don't see anyone else there except for things that shouldn't be happening there essentially.
Do people fish from the shore there?
No, so, at the point of where the property is, if you look at the map, I'm not sure if it shows the water there or the water not there. Depending on the amount of water that's in the lake, as we all know, fluctuates massively. Generally, there is, so one, unless you're wearing hip waders, no. Most people that are fishing or pulling off the road fishing aren't gonna be over their knees in mud. If there is no water there, it's not fishable at all whatsoever. It's all a floating heath, at more about 20 feet out. And to access it fishing wise, you would be well above your knee in mud. Now, I'm not saying down, if you look where like the guardrail begins, where it becomes very narrow, where there's not actual property there. After that, there is a little pull-off there, that you can fish at that point down there. There's multiple pull-offs all the way up through, Plantation 8 or whatever it is up there as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nobody fishes until you get down, like you said, to the guardrail area.
Yeah, like I said, I've been there many times. Obviously, it's more in my interest, but just being truthful with you, whatever happens, it doesn't much matter to me. But I haven't seen anyone actually utilizing that other than to literally jump out with their shotgun and shoot while being in an illegal scenario, or trash dumping, because literally you can pull in and there's a little thing of trees there and there's a bank, and that's literally where you have to walk down, because it's not, like you can't stop there with your kids. No one with a fishing pole is just gonna stop there. It's not easily accessible, whereas the next 20 of them up, you can easily jump out, make a couple casts and leave. This is just not really a spot to do that.
And Manager Mosher, as far as you know, in all the years that the city has held this, no property owner or budding property owners have approached the city with an interest for this property?
No,
This
not
for-
that I've
Yeah.
ever been
I
familiar
also
with.
talked to upstairs and asked that if anyone's ever approached about buying it, because that's a lot of years that no one's ever said anything about it. And quite frankly, unless I had my hunting app and started digging into it, I wouldn't have known City of Ellsworth even owned it. I would have assumed it was the abutting landowner at that point. And I asked them upstairs if there's any notes or anything written down about anyone asking to purchase it or anything like that. And that's when I was talking to Mr. Phillips, because I couldn't find anything at all. And he mentioned that he remembered, I can't remember the gentleman's name now, I have it written down, but way back, about 15 years ago, there was another 3 lots of land that were buildable that a couple asked the town about buying, and the city manager, where it was not a tax acquired property, said, yep, this is a price, and they went through the process and sold it. And so that's what I was pretty much here for, and what I asked Mr. Moser to bring up is that possible? And if so, great.
Councilor Miller?
Yeah, I would, much as I would like to just go ahead and do it, don't we have a procedure already in place for it going out to a public bid? Is that?
So with foreclosed property, that's the procedure that's followed, is once the council decides that they want to sell the property, then it goes out to a bidding process. Obviously, this is the first parcel of land that I've ever been a part of that was not foreclosure, but was gifted to the city. And my understanding, based on his conversation with John Phillips, previous counselor, is that that process was previously followed, in that the city manager was granted authority to sell it, and then he, at the time, negotiated with the individuals who was interested in buying it. So that's my knowledge of that transaction, but typically, yes, with foreclosed properties, they do go out to bid.
Councilor Caplan?
Is this property, because it's owned by the city currently, available for public access? So people can just go onto it and they're not trespassing?
Correct.
But if we sell it, it becomes private property, and whoever may have used that property before can no longer do that.
Correct.
Can I put in on that note? I do agree with you there. About, if you look on your map right where it pops back out after the guardrail, going farther down 179, there are 2 pull-offs, one on each side, that are actually accessible, whether you want to do boat, kayak, kids, anything like that. You can actually use it there, whereas this one is not being used in that manner.
I have to agree with him, there's really nothing there, except there were a lot of birds there.
Yeah, I mean, they go in and out of there during, the biggest thing that, I don't know if you guys know Eric Rudolph, I've had pretty lengthy conversations with him about it, but people will literally, the birds will stay in that area because I don't know if any of you guys hunt or anything, but when you're there in the early morning, people will drive by, coming back and forth from like Waltham, Eastbrook and everything, and they will literally jump out at the guardrail with a loaded gun and shoot. That is the only time I have ever witnessed that being used at that point. Not saying that it's anything other than that, but that's, you go in that parking lot any time during migratory waterfowl season, you'll see shells right next to the road. So we're utilizing it in a way and cleaning up the trash at that. So I agree with what you're saying, not to take away from other people by any means, but at this point, if you were to visit the site and look at it, you would find out pretty quickly that no one's gonna choose that over the next 20 of them by any means, just by every way, shape, and form.
So, in terms of the motion, my understanding is that the city manager has the authority to do this, but has chosen to bring it to the council for endorsement. Personally, I don't have a concern about it, other than just making sure that we double check to make sure that we do have the ability to do what we're talking about. And if that is the case through the attorney, where there has been no interest in the property by others, it's not a buildable lot. If it were a buildable lot, I think I'd be more inclined to put it out to bid and go through that. I like the idea that the fact that you're gonna take care of the property and stop the trash, and that you sound like you're very responsible in terms of, as a hunter and all of that. So, I think it's, for me, I like the idea. I think it's a good decision, and if there's a motion to do that with, that's what we would entertain, and then let the manager.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we sell the property, as with the stipulation that we find out it is completely legal, with the city manager to negotiate with you to sell the property.
Has there been any discussion on price? I see it's assessed at 12.1.
That was what that was a conversation that Larry and I had, but I haven't had any discussion with this individual about price, because I wanted to get clarity as to how council, if you wanted to sell it, and if you did, how you wanted to proceed with it, so.
So maybe before we get a second on it, what's your name?
Sebastian.
Sebastian.
Color.
So if we,
His name is.
put his name in there. So.
Yes.
From my understanding, the other three properties were sold with a mixture of the assessing value and the amount of taxes that were lost in the time that the town was gifted the property. The city manager came up with a price with those. As far as I'm concerned, if whatever price he comes up with, if I can afford it, great. If I can't, totally understood.
Well, we've lost $500,000 so far.
Oh, jeez. Well, I love hunting, but I don't know about that much.
So I'd like to add his name to the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor? All those opposed?
I'm trying to decide right now.
Okay. Let's
I like the
keep
idea of it going
discussion.
private, but at the same time, I don't like the idea of taking it from somebody else's, somebody else's use.
Well, I like that he's gonna take care of it, and if you go out and look at the property, you will see that there's really not much else. He is being completely truthful. There's really nothing else you can do. And if you drive up the road 100 yards, there's plenty of places to pull over and utilize the lake, but not from there.
But it's also setting a precedent.
There's already been a precedent set,
And it becomes taxable property.
and then it becomes taxable property.
And I agree with what you're saying.
I do too.
If, for me, if the city had, were using it like the city forest and had, and had access and used it in that manner, this really was just property that somebody said, here, take it, and we as a city really haven't done anything with it, we don't promote it, we don't use it, it doesn't sound like it's being used by others, so,
Well, apparently it's being used by people with guns.
yeah. And that's why we should.
But you're responsible as well. And he can make that private, he can clean up the area and he can stop the illegal activities that are going on. And, he can help, he can put up signs anyway to try and stop the illegal.
Do you want me to call the vote? Are you ready? Ready, yeah.
This is a toughie. It's a tough one.
So we have a motion and
I'll
a second.
I'll vote for it.
All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Abstentions?
I'm gonna hold you to that cleanup.
I do it all the time. Even when I'm out there hunting, I pick up other people's shells, literally just because my main thing is if a warden ever pulls up, the first thing he's checking is your gun, your license. Literally, we range find where we hunt and everything, and all the time. If you go drive by it, pull right in there, you'll see not accessible. And if you look anytime near migratory waterfowl season, you'll see shells all right there, right up against the tar and right up against the guardrail. I've had conversations with the homeowners down because they come right over and just like, are you this guy that was out here shooting yesterday? I was like, no, I'm way over there. Like, I try to do everything I can and clean it up as much as I can. And
Do they really use the word guy, or do they?
actually, believe it or not, I walked out to the marsh once and a homeowner was screaming at me because someone had parked there, walked through their woods and was sitting up against their chicken coop the morning before, and they had them on camera. And they had the picture there, and it's definitely not me. But someone was sitting up against their chicken coop 50 feet from their house trying to hunt. So, I mean, there's some negligence there by far.
So, Councilor O'Connell, did you abstain because of conflict?
I did.
You do have a conflict?
I believe I have too close a relationship to be involved in this
Okay,
conversation.
just wanted to have that overt. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13, Council Order Number 071802, request of the Public Works Director to replace the street light heads along Myrick Street.
Good evening, councilors. Lisa Zuckledge, Public Works Director. In the spring of 2022, the city had hired Daigle Electric Construction Corp. to look into the street lighting along Myrick Street, as most of the lights had burnt out over the winter. It was unknown to city staff which of these lights along that corridor were the city's to maintained and hooked up to our electric meter, and which ones belonged to Walmart and Home Depot. These lights were installed in the early mid-2000s during the Myrick Street project. DEC was able to verify which lights were hooked up into the city's meters and to determine that all but one of the lights are fixable. It was determined that we have 13 lights along this corridor, of which 6 are currently working after they installed 5 new 400-watt LED inserts. These lights were originally 750 or 1,000-watt light fixtures, and the 400-watt inserts that they were able to get really don't meet the needs of this corridor. After extensive search for higher watt inserts, DEC was not able to locate anything that would fit into our existing fixture style. So we are requesting to replace the existing fixtures / heads with these new Cobra style fixtures, which will be LEDs. And then that would be funded out of the local roads.
Councilor Pell.
So these are 4,000 watts?
There's 750 and 1,000. So what happened is all these lights burnt out, and we only had, I think at the time, like 3 or 4 of them that were working. So we needed to investigate which ones we owned, why they weren't working. You know, was it light bulbs or was it wiring? We had no history. None of us here had any history on which ones, what was what. So we hired them to look into it. What they could find was these 400-watt inserts that were readily available, and they put them up to test them to see if maybe the 400-watt LEDs would be bright enough compared to the 750 or 1,000-watt, I believe, halogens or whatever they were before. They're not. It's still fairly dark up there. We need some higher wattage for that corridor. Problem is the way our fixtures, or the current fixtures are, and I can't remember if it's, which way it is ours hang down and all the inserts are set to be put in sideways. And so you can't get a LED conversion kit that will fit what we have out there. So we're asking to basically replace just the head part that holds the light bulb, essentially, on all the 13 fixtures that we own. So we can get some lighting in that corridor.
And the new ones, we're not concerned about like excess light pollution?
No, they can adjust them so that they have the same like light area that the other ones did before. I can't think of what the word I'm looking for is, but
So just as a matter of process, we do have a streetlight committee, and again, kind of going back to our ordinances, this type of request should go to the committee, and the committee should then make a request back to the council based on that. Are we at risk of losing anything in terms of, if that's in terms of the cost?
yes, so this price is good until August 15th, which is why we're here now instead of in August. So if we wait, the price is set to go up. I don't know exactly how much it's set to go up, but there is a price increase. Sorry, August 12th, there's a price increase. And it wasn't just myself, it was myself, Manager Mosier, and Jason from IT. We were the three that were involved in looking into this and investigating and getting to this point.
Lisa, what's the brightness of this light again, please?
The new ones?
Yes.
I believe they're 1,000 watt.
How many lumens?
Is that going to be enough
What's that?
for a street light?
Yeah, that's what we have they would be the same as we have right now, and I can't remember exactly how many are 750s and how many are 1000s, I think. Jason can probably tell better, but I think the brighter ones are at the actual intersections, like the Myrick Down East Highway and the Myrick Walmart, and then the 750s are in the, like, approaching the intersections.
The reason I ask, I have a 5,000 LED spotlight at my house. Does a nice job of lighting up the driveway. I can't imagine that a 1,000 would do that job. But this is all new to me.
To
I'm
be
not a
honest with you, this
streetlight-
is the first time I've dealt with streetlights like this before, or any of us have, so I'm basing this off of that's why we hired these guys to look into it for us and their recommendation. And their recommendation is also coming from a distributor, Halophane, which is a huge streetlight distributor
Okay, I'll take the
nationwide.
recommendation then.
Yeah, I don't think you want them overly bright for a couple of reasons. Number one, light pollution, and number two, you also don't want, for people with glaucoma or at night, that rain glare that people can get, that with the streetlights too bright, you can't see.
I know all about that.
So, what are we doing?
One other question, just in terms of the lights itself, would change, are there any ordinances in terms of when that part was developed, in terms of the requirements that we have to meet, in terms of the type of fixture, in terms of the looks, anything like that?
No?
So Ken, if we're doing that, we're going to be talking and possibly doing a special meeting regarding one of the topics. Can we hold a streetlight committee meeting prior to the date? And then when we do the meeting about the solar moratorium, hold a special council.
That's next Monday. It's next Monday. We'd have to do it before that.
The committee would have to meet this week.
Who's on the committee?
I don't know who else. Yeah, me.
I think you two represent the council, I believe.
Well, I'm not going on the committee or not.
I
Jason's
could do it.
trying to save me.
Mind if I?
No, not at all.
I'm not familiar with the streetlight ordinance, so I just wanted to bring this up. Would it be necessary to have the committee meeting if we're just maintaining existing streetlights, as opposed to adding or removing? Because we're not adding or removing streetlights, we're maintaining, upgrading,
Broken.
replacing, it's essentially no different than replacing a blown bulb, except we're just changing the type of bulb at the same time. So, I just wonder if that's required. The other thing,
That's a good point. That's a good,
the other thing with Mark's thing, I think, Mark, you're comparing lumens to watts. So your light's probably a 5,000 lumen, which is much less
You're right.
than the
Yeah,
wattage, so.
that's what it is.
These are 1,000 watt, I actually don't know the lumens on these particular lights, but they're equivalent wattage to they're an LED equivalent wattage to the lights that we're replacing, so.
Okay.
you sit in that room and Google everything for these answers, right?
No, I didn't need to Google it.
Walk in, throw it up.
I told him.
I was
Now you know
waiting,
why.
I was waiting as long as I could to see how this was, you know.
No, that's very helpful, thank you. That makes a lot of
But,
sense to
and
me.
he's correct. I was thinking lumens.
So, thank you.
The members on that committee are Counselor Chaplin, Counselor Miller, and Counselor Hanson.
Okay.
How
Are
many
you-
counselors does it take to change a light bulb?
It takes at least three.
All right, is there any recommended action motion?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve as presented.
Second.
A motion is second, any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item 14, Council Order Number 071803, request of the Public Works Director to increase funding for engineering services for the Water Street Pump Station project.
Good evening, still counselors. So attached in your files, excuse me, sorry, is my memo and documentation from our engineering firm, Woodard and Curran, requesting a scope and fee adjustment for the construction phase of the work on the Water Street Pump Station project. Their letter requests a total increase of $75,000 due to the need to extend the project schedule and to entice bidders and to allow for the time frame needed to procure materials. Woodard and Curran is here. I asked them to come tonight, Brent from Woodard and Curran, to explain further if needed.
Is anybody interested in further explanation?
Brent Bridges from Woodard and Curran. And as you've probably, before we've talked about the Water Street Pump Station, which is the wastewater pump station down off on the Union River next to RF Jordan. Handles 2/3 of the wastewater flow that goes through the city. Through this project that's been ongoing for about 2 years now. As far as last year, this is certainly not the great time to be able to bidding projects. In order to put this project out to bid and entice bidders, we had to do a few things. Number one, we had to extend the period of time in which the construction would occur. And so the construction will start next spring of 2023, because that's when available contractors are ready to do the work. The other concession was that no one, because of the way that both workforce and materials are available these days, no one would commit to a schedule that wasn't extended from what we put together. And so the schedule is not only next year to do the construction, they require 50% more time to do the work in order to bid the project. The good news is we had 3 bidders, and there is one secured, and T-Buck Construction is the low bidder, and that is been awarded. And so, but because of that, because of the time, we generally, from a construction admin and inspection, so we inspect the work, we do construction admin, pay requests, responses, operation manuals, as-built, all that stuff really is 50% more time for us to do it. Having it done next year doesn't necessarily increase cost, but doing it over 50% more time does increase cost as far as our participation on-site with the contractor going through things. And so what we're requesting is because of that 50% more. The other thing that happens these days is because of availability of materials, we thought we were smart enough to avoid some of that. We pre-purchased the pumps that are required, and so those are long lead time items. And so the pumps for the pump station have been pre-purchased as a separate process, so those are ready and ready to go. But even with that, contractors are facing such a challenge about getting materials, and what we've seen on other project is lots of opportunities and requests. Can I swap something out? I need to do it in a different sequence. And so there's a lot more of that goes on these days because of this time frame and what contractors are facing on getting materials. And so there's a little bit of that is crept into this project as well. We hope to avoid that. We certainly don't want to change out materials, but availability of things sometimes we have to consider, as well as the sequence of things. One of the important things on this particular project is bypass pumping. And so it is the pump station that takes 2/3 of your flow in the city. And so the time to be able to bypass all the flow while you're doing work is certainly critical. It's also, as you know, very tight site with close abutters to be able to manage all this work as well. And so I think those are the things that kept the contractor wanting a little more time to be able to accomplish this work successfully. And so what you have in front of you is our request to say we've added 50% of the schedule to the contractor, and the things that are affected by us are inspection on site, construction admin during the period, questions, those kind of things. And so it's just directly correlated to extra time for the construction work, extra time for us to be providing the oversight. That's as quick as I could do it.
Would these variables have been foreseeable at the time that your initial bid to do the engineering was proposed?
No. We were, I think, 2 years ago, we were under contract to do the design. And what has crept into the construction industry, the challenges on the Water Street pump station, as opposed to some of the other projects the city has, is because of the pressures on getting that work done, because of its safety, operability, capacity, is really drove that schedule. So the city couldn't necessarily sit back and wait and do that at a later time until maybe things calmed down a little bit. It really was driven to be able to be done right now. And so we had to bid it now to be able to do it for all of those factors. And so there was no chance to delay it until things got better.
So I'm going to just make a general comment. This is just reflective of me, not on this project, but just in terms of our process. I think it's one of the things that when I ran for council, I felt it was important for the council members to talk about why they may support something or why they don't. So when they vote, the public knows. And to just have votes without any context behind why you're voting for or against, I think is a disservice to the community, and it doesn't allow for the robust discussion that I think we should have. So for me, I would appreciate it, whatever your position is, to have that on the table during discussion on, some issues are pretty matter of fact, some issues are more involved, and I think it just helps to be able to have a discussion as a group about what our positions are. So that's just a general comment. On this, I certainly understand what you're talking about. The concern that we have as a city is that this is a project that's long overdue in terms of needing to get done. It has to get done. It's not just something we want to do. We're really mandated to make sure by external forces. And so all these concessions that have had to take place to get this project finally out to bid, accepted, and scheduled is a very significant piece for the city. And when you hear 2/3 of the flow goes through this one station, that's not insignificant either. So although it'd be great if it didn't cost as much, it would be great if we weren't sitting here having to spend more on the project. But at the end of the day, The reality is what the reality is, and we have to, as a city, address this issue. We've been trying to get to this for 2+ years.
Mr. Chairman, I think most of the robust discussion that you are desirous of took place in the initial vote back when we initially approved it. And it was seen as a must-do then through updates and through mandates. And as you say, with 2/3 of the flow going through it. Is there another choice? We aren't putting 2/3 through the other 1/3 pipe, so.
Mr. Chair, could I address Councilor Kaplan's comment? One of the things, I think that this started a while back as far as the Water Street, and so a little bit was cast a little bit as far as the timing on things. What we've tried to do, we sat down with the city about a year ago and talked about how we can be more strategic as far as look at infrastructure planning, water, wastewater, stormwater. And that might be a bit of a way to look at these things so they're not like independent projects that get not as much support from outside sources for you and not so efficient as far as the contractors bidding on them. And so one of the things we did from that meeting a year ago is how can we better plan for the future from a capital standpoint over the next 5 years. And so what we've worked with the city on are so High Street Pump Station, stormwater, how can we collectively look at all those things so we can be more efficient, more timely, and capture more funding from other sources? And so I think, I'll wait till August when we talk about some other things, but I think that approach has made us more successful as far as attracting grant funding to be able to help on some of those projects, because we're a little more strategic as far as looking at them collectively, as opposed to independent projects that are more challenging to execute. And so we've tried to kind of learn from the experience of the last couple of years to take a more comprehensive strategic look that can capture more assistance for the city, as well as plan better for the timing at which we do these projects.
I guess what I'm looking at is that the initial engineering project contract was for $214,875, and that was supposed to include the engineering work, start date, completion date, providing the services, everything that's supposed to be provided, and most contracts can't just be increased like that. You can't just change it in the middle of it. But at the same time, how do we protect the people who we value, who are putting out bids and getting service, we're getting services from? If we want quality service, we can't just say, well, we're holding you to your original contract and that's it, because we won't get quality bids. So my mind is just working right now.
It's free, by the way.
I'm sorry?
We have a $2 million grant, part of which will pay for this excessive money. So it's not going to come out of any budget that the city's involved with at the moment. We're on a crunch with DEP to get this done. DEP gave us ARPA funding in the amount of $2 million and has given us permission to use that money to match whatever we need for the Water Street Pump Station to complete it. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that this isn't extra money that we're asking out of our proprietary fund or the city's contingency funds or whatever. It's grant money that we're awarded that we're going to use to pay this offset. Just want to let everybody know that.
Thanks, Mike.
I was waiting to say that's in the motion, that it comes from bond/grant funding.
New rule, city staff should always start with it's free.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the request of the Public Works Director to increase the bidding and construction phase engineering budget for the Water Street Pump Station project by $75,500 to a not-to-exceed amount of $290,375, and to allow the city manager to sign required documentation funding for this project to be from bond proceeds and grant funding.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
This is the last increase?
Yes.
Seeing no more discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 15, request of the Public Works Director for discussion and action on proposed next steps for the Branch Lake Dam evaluation and engineering.
Good evening, councilors. At the December 12th, 2021 council meeting, the city council approved going into an agreement with the engineering firm GEI Consultants to review and engineer some work needed on the Branch Lake Dam. After meeting on site with the engineering firm to discuss the current condition of the dam and what is known about the existing dam, GEI put together an overview of potential ideas to fix the leaking dam section. To determine the best method of repair, additional information is needed. So a phase 2 of the project was proposed via the attached document. During discussions between GEI, myself, the water superintendent, and the watershed steward, it was determined that there were numerous unknowns and potential safety hazards with the existing dam that were not originally part of the scope of the project when we put it together and put it out to GEI, and are really justifiable to having an experienced engineering firm review. I've asked GEI to come and kind of give you a brief presentation on the existing condition of the dam and what they're proposing for their next phase. And ultimately what I'm asking is to increase the funding to the $175,000 that we have in the bond for the dam work, to use that full funding to look into the engineering and get more information on what really needs to be done at the dam, and then find construction phase money once we get through the engineering process. But I'm gonna let her do a presentation and show you more about what I'm talking about. This is Jillian from GEI.
Hi. Helps if I can remember my password.
Could you turn the screen a little? So we can
Yes.
see it?
Thank you.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Find it.
All right. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Jillian Williams. I'm with GEI Consultants in our Portland office, and I'm here to talk a little bit about Branch Lake Dam. So a quick agenda. I'm going to talk a little bit about the project background and our scope of work, a little bit about the dam background, the dam deficiencies, and our proposed investigations. I have questions listed last, but if you have anything that you don't understand as I'm going through or any clarifying questions, please feel free to speak up. So I am a civil engineer. I focus in geotechnical engineering and dam safety. That includes dam inspection, analysis, and design. And while my other teammates are not here tonight, we do have a multidisciplined team working on this project. Barney Baker is a structural engineer. Lissa Robinson is a hydrologic and hydraulic engineer. And they're both also in our Portland office. And then we have 2 in-house consultants for geotechnical engineering and structural engineering. So back in the fall, the city sent out a request for qualifications and proposal for Branch Lake Dam. The city had a list of concerns about the dam, and that included the left embankment upstream sheet pile was corroded with downstream seepage. And here you can see in this top picture, this is a photo from the city, the corrosion along the water level. The fence and gate to the gated concrete spillway has been vandalized and damaged. There's no guardrail or fall protection on the upstream side of the gated spillway, so that's this picture here. So these are the gate operators, and there's 4 sluice gates. In order to open these gates, city personnel have to walk out onto this crest structure and turn these little things with a pipe wrench in order to open the gates. And so this is the reservoir right here. There is a fall, possibility here into the reservoir. And if one of the gates was opened and somebody fell in, the flow through the gate could pin a person against the fish screens. The sluice gate opening grate supporting rods have been vandalized and corroded. The sluice gate operators have been vandalized. The gates are difficult to open. There's supposed to be a protective housing on these operators, and I think a crank or a hand wheel in order to open those gates. And the operator mounting studs have been ripped out and become anchored from the concrete. So due to some lack of information and uncertainties about the dam, we proposed a phased approach to this project. Phase 1 was a site visit and then a review of available background information, and then a concept level alternatives analysis of what could be done to fix the dam. So we did that already, and from that Phase 1, we had a list of recommendations of field investigations for Phase 2, and the field investigations would then inform the final design on what would be the most economical solutions for rehabilitation of the dam. And then Phase 4 would be construction, observation, and administration during the construction project. So a little bit about the background of the dam. It was originally constructed in 1911, so it is 111 years old, by the Bangor Hydro Company. It was initially used for water control for downstream power generation for the Bangor Hydroelectric Facility on the Union River. It was acquired by the city in 1994. It's currently the sole public water supply for the city. There's also recreation on the lake and residences along the lake, and discharges are made through the dam for fish downstream. The dam is regulated by the state of Maine, the Maine Emergency Management Agency. The regulations for the state are in Chapter 24, Dam Safety, and the dam is considered a significant hazard potential dam. The hazard potential is solely the incremental consequences downstream if the dam were to fail. It is not an assessment on the condition of the dam itself. So a significant hazard potential dam, there's no probable loss of life, but a failure could cause major economic loss or environmental damage. The storage capacity is about 18,000 acre feet, and the watershed is about 30 square miles. Discharge goes through Branch Lake Stream to Leonard Lake. So this is a plan view of the dam, and north is towards the top of the screen. So starting on the left, this is the west or left embankment, and then there's the concrete gated spillway. There's 2 gravity walls, the central and the east, and then there's this old section of concrete wall here kind of in the middle. There's also a dike here called Runaround Dike Number 1. There is supposedly a Runaround Dike Number 2, but I have not been able to find that in any of the old documents. Discharge through the spillway goes down Branch Lake Stream through these twin culverts that are underneath Branch Lake Road. So in 2000, there was a pretty major rehabilitation of this dam, and that included a new concrete gated spillway where these 4 sluice gates are, and the central and the east gravity walls. And the concrete condition of the rehabilitation from 2000 is in good condition. The issues that exist today are really the left embankment that was not rehabilitated in 2000, this old concrete wall, which was not done in 2000, and then some issues with the gate components, some which from vandals, like I discussed earlier, and then there's also some questions on what is the capacity, the discharge capacity of the gates. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So on the bottom here, this is an elevation view, like we're looking at the front face of the dam. This is elevation here on the left. This is the concrete gated spillway with these 4 sluice gates. They're each 48 inches by 48 inches. They're shown a little bit more detail up here. There's a gate stem, and then there's that operator that you could see up on the dam crest. This guardrail here is on the downstream side to prevent someone from falling off, but there's no guardrail on the upstream side. So this left embankment has an upstream sheet pile, and we know near the concrete gated structure that bedrock is about 14 to 15 feet down because this concrete structure is founded on bedrock. What we don't know is where bedrock is along the rest of this dike. Prior to 2000, there was a boring done somewhere on the left abutment. I'm not entirely sure where. I haven't seen the boring log. I haven't been able to find that. But bedrock was about 23 feet deep. And then the old concrete wall is shown here. It's not particularly high, and it is founded on rock. So it's just kind of a little short section of wall. So these are a couple excerpts from our Phase 1 report, and they're about observations by others. So after the 2000 rehabilitation, in 2001, there was seepage at the left embankment, so the embankment that was not rehabilitated, and that was estimated to be about 10 to 15 gallons per minute. 10 years later, MEMA did an inspection, and they recommended to repair the left dike sheet piling, repair that old section of concrete wall, and they estimated that seepage through that left embankment was about 50 gallons per minute. So these are subjective estimates from different people. They may not be entirely accurate, but it does suggest that there is an increase in seepage through that left embankment as that steel sheet pile continues to deteriorate with time. So our contract started in January, and I did a site visit back in January. It was very snowy at the time, so there were some features that could not be seen very well, and some access and safety considerations, but I wanted to share a few of the things that we noticed. So this is the left embankment here. That's the left abutment. So we're looking left down. This is the upstream sheet pile. And you can kind of tell here that the sheet pile is actually bowing or bulging into the reservoir. This is the reservoir side. And this is the embankment crest. This, again, is the city picture of the deterioration and corrosion along the water line of the sheet pile. And this picture on the bottom here, this is also from the city. This is showing the left embankment crest with the gated spillway in front of us. And on the left, there's a riprap slope, and you can see there's a lot of large trees. Trees' roots will grow towards the water source, so they will grow upstream through the embankment, and those tree roots can cause preferential seepage paths through the embankment. So typically, we recommend that there should be no trees or brush or large vegetation on a dam or within 15 feet of the dam. So there is some vegetation control that's needed. On the right here, this is again a city picture, and this is that old section of concrete wall. I couldn't get close to it during the site visit because it was too snowy and icy, but you can see that it has deteriorated in comparison to the 2000 walls that are on either side. And then again, this picture, this is the gated spillway crest. These are the operators. They've been vandalized. And you can tell, particularly on this third one, that the mounting bracket has jacked, the operator is misaligned, possibly freeze-thaw effects, possibly vandals. But the city reports that all of these gates are difficult to open. A couple of things that we noted from our review of available information is that there's no documentation that we could find of what discharge capacity you can have through those 4 sluice gates. So we don't know if it can pass the 50-year flood, the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood. And since the gates are difficult to open, if there was a large flood event and we needed all those gates to be open to pass the flood, they could not be able to open them. The reservoir level could rise, the dam could potentially be overtopped, which could lead to damage or failure of the dam. And it also could be a problem for the residences on the lake. I understand they have septic systems, so there could be environmental issues with contamination of the drinking water supply or possibly damage to their properties. On the left here, this is a section through the existing left embankment. It's a fieldstone embankment, which is, it's like a dry stacked stone embankment, kind of like an old farmer's wall. This is the sheet pile on the upstream side. It's connected to these timbers. This is the reservoir level here, and this is some gravel buttressing. You might notice that in the photos that I showed you before of this steel sheet pile, it looks vertical or even bulging into the reservoir, but it was actually constructed on a slope. So my thought is that this deterioration along the wall, the sheet pile's bending into the reservoir, there could be some gravel from the crest that's coming down in between the sheet pile and the fieldstone. On the downstream side, this is that riprap slope that I showed earlier. There's a lot of trees on this slope. One thing that's not shown here is what this embankment is founded on. And again, that's kind of our biggest unknown, is what is the foundation material here. It's reported in one of the old reports that it's gravel and boulders, but knowing that foundation material will help us pick an appropriate and an economical repair option. Two possible repair options. The top one is a partial repair, where we use a reinforced concrete to provide that seepage control that the sheet pile is no longer providing, and to kind of help buttress the structure. Or a full repair, shown here on the bottom. That's you remove all of the embankment and build a new embankment that to today's current industry standards. So from our phase one, we developed a bunch of recommendations, and these are really to inform final design. So the recommendations include a geotechnical investigation for support of the left embankment rehabilitation design. We proposed 3 borings along that left embankment crest to determine what is the foundation, what's the depth and the quality of bedrock. We also need a site survey of the embankment and the tie-in with all the concrete structures for development of design drawings. We want to assess that old section of concrete wall, have one of our structural engineers take a look at it, see if it should be replaced or if it can be rehabilitated. Assess the gate and railing options for the gated spillway, including the fall protection, which is both, I think, a public safety issue, since obviously vandals have been on that crest playing with the gate operators. So it's public safety, it's also safety of city personnel to operate those gates. A dive inspection to assess why are the sluice gates difficult to open. There could be debris in the gate slots. There could be deterioration of those sliding members. So that's something that a dive inspection would help us to understand. Contact the gate manufacturer to replace the vandalized gate parts. Perform a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis, and that would help us to understand what discharge the gates can pass, what design flood, what flood event the gates can pass, and also assess what the appropriate inflow design flood for the project is. So the state of Maine, Chapter 24, dam safety does not say which inflow design flood a dam has to pass, but for example, in Massachusetts, a significant hazard dam of a similar size would have to be able to pass the 500-year flood. In New York, an existing dam would have to be able to pass 150% of the 100-year flood. Since it's not specified in the main regs, I think it really comes down to the city's risk. How important is the asset to you? What do you think the downstream risks are? And what do you feel comfortable? What kind of risk profile are you willing to accept? And then consider an uncontrolled spillway. So like I mentioned, the gates are difficult to open. They also need human intervention. Someone has to recognize that there is a precipitation event coming, that the gates need to be open. They have to go to the dam and open the gates. If you had an uncontrolled spillway, that would be, usually it's like a notch in the concrete at a lower elevation, at the elevation that you want the reservoir to stay at. If the reservoir rises above that, it just starts spilling on its own. There's no human intervention or moving gate parts needed. So that could help with a few things. One is fewer visits by city staff to have to adjust gates, especially in the spring. It also would help if one of the gates wasn't able to be opened, you have some redundancy in discharge. And also, based on the results of the age and age analysis, maybe it helps you pass a bigger flood than you can currently pass. So those are some of the unknowns and how we would like to address those for final design. And then it's a conversation of what's important to the city, how important is the asset. So our Phase 2 proposal included 6 tasks to address those recommendations from our Phase 1 report. The first is the subsurface investigation at the left embankment. That is the largest single price on here. I recognize that that is high. However, the risk is that if you don't know what the foundation conditions are, then when you get to construction, you might encounter conditions that are different than were assumed during design. So there could be construction changes and redesign and delays at that point, which could add up to a lot of money. The site survey is to get the topography and the tie-in with the dam or the concrete structures, and that's to advance design drawings. The structural assessment is to have the structural engineer go look at that old concrete wall. The sluice gate inspection is to have divers go out to check out the gate parts, figure out what's going on, why they're difficult to open, and how they can be fixed. And the hydrologic and hydraulic analysis is to understand get the spillway rating curve and understand an appropriate inflow design flood. And then we'll summarize those tasks in a letter report, and that will be our recommendations for final design. So that's what I have for a formal presentation, but I'm happy to take questions.
Council Miller.
Is there a up-to-date disaster plan for this dam?
Emergency action plan?
There is, yes. We just did one this past fall as part of the renewal process.
And what's the risk to the citizens determined by that disaster plan?
I'll be honest, I can't give you an answer right now. I have to go back and review it.
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, obviously, the Leonard Lake Dam is much more significant, but if this were to fail, then that's likely to cause catastrophic failure further down.
That and it
And
is
that-
our public water source, which is really the biggest problem of all, to be honest. And then, sorry, back in 2017, the state of Maine, dam inspector, the state of Maine has been going through dam inspectors like on a rotating basis every year. But the last time they were out here, sorry, not 2017, because I was here, so 2019. And it's been, the seepage we've been talking about in that left embankment is getting progressively worse, and it has been noted on probably the last 10 years worth of dam inspectors, when they do come visit, that we need to address this issue.
And just for, I mean, I'm way beyond my knowledge base, so the city hired a firm that's an expert in this area. And your recommendation is based on what you've done so far, that we need to move that forward to the next phase, or risk that, at this point, that there could be a failure. That this isn't just something that we can just brush aside. That's your recommendation. It needs to be addressed, and we need to follow that through.
Correct.
I mean, infrastructure doesn't get better with time. Things will continue to deteriorate if it's not addressed. I'm not saying that it's going to fail tomorrow or anything like that. But it's getting worse, and, you know, the situation is not going to get better with time.
And with larger and larger storm events, I think it's critical. Like, one of the things I brought and asked her to come here for is because in talking with her and going through this process, there's things that I didn't think of when I put this RFP out that would be needed to get a better handle on design, such as the hydraulic and hydrology and just those kind of information that I wasn't thinking about. And it's correct. The more and more storms we have, the bigger storms we have, we're going to need to know what this piece of infrastructure can handle and be better prepared.
And are we do we have staff that are going, opening that?
Mr.
and
Whedon
walking-
is the lucky one
So
that
I-
is usually in and
So
out
the-
there where, you know, when it's snowy and icy and rain events are happening. And
So my next question is, and this might be for the fire chief in terms of, can you tie down to the railing that's on the other side and require that so that there's some element of safety so that if there's a slip, that somebody doesn't fall off of that? But I think we need to look at the temporary safety
Yep.
measures, so that that doesn't happen, because that really concerns me based on what you presented, and just looking at it, I can't imagine if it's that hard to turn and you slip, you can just imagine what could happen.
Yep.
And
Which is why we try to, if possible, send 2 people out there. But one of the things, and we can look into, I mean, it's obviously a possibility. Most harnesses have a 6-foot lanyard, and I'm not sure if you did 6 feet. I mean, it can
Yeah,
be
I
looked
don't,
into.
and
Yep.
again, it's not my expertise, so I just,
But I think that's a great comment. Fall protection would be a great interim, temporary safety measure for sure.
Councilor
I had a geotechnical specialist approach me that's not working on this dam, but working on one that's a little more upstream. And they're telling me that the left wing wall is at risk of failure. Now, if that goes, does that go down to this dam? Or are they separate?
The left wing wall at the other dam?
Right, further upstream.
If you're talking up at Graham Lake.
Right.
They're
different,
so
right?
Branch Lake
They come together.
stream connects into the Union River, but Graham Lake would not affect Branch Lake, but Branch Lake would affect the big dam right out
Down
here,
here,
downtown.
yes.
Leonard Lake.
Yes.
Yeah, I was involved in the disaster planning in both for Leonard Lake Dam and Graham Lake Dam, but not this dam. That's why I wanted to know the impacts downstream from this disaster plan. I understand that there are a lot of severe consequences, but I want the citizens to be aware of what they are as well.
Yep, we are actually meeting with MEMA. We're setting up a meeting for, I believe, this fall to do a MEMA tabletop exercise for that dam. You are more than welcome to join us if you've been part of the other ones.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
I just want to add that as part of the school board and being on 4 years on the Transportation and Facilities Committee, my buses, almost all of our kids are on the shore road 5 days a week, twice a day during school. And if that dam goes, that's approximately 3,000 acres, and how tall is that dam? 10 feet, 9 feet? So it's 3,000 acres times 14 feet. And if you look at the topography of how that would come down, it would take so much debris and trees, everything with it. It would hit Leonard Lake so hard and so fast, you'd lose a shore road. And you would lose anything on the shore road at the time. Any of my buses are on that shore road. We'd lose them. And I was in Florida during the Sunshine Skyway Bridge problem incident. You don't ever want to live through that. You don't ever want to look back on that kind of regret. And we do have to handle this carefully, because there's nobody really holding the people who own the dams kind of accountable to these safety standards. Like a lot of these are saying, they're stamping them as okay, and then we're coming back saying, well, gosh, they're kind of not. And what happens if we don't get onto this very quickly? It can be, you know, bigger than we anticipated, especially with our kids.
Mr. Chairman, it's been noted here tonight that for 10 years, we've been getting reports that the dam is worsening and seeping more and more and more, which tells me that for 10 years, we've kicked the can down the road. I think it's time to stop kicking and repair it. There's way too much that can go wrong. With what's been heard here tonight, but also keep in mind, this is the city's sole drinking water supply. So it's, in my mind, this is pretty cheap dollars to protect it, because anything else is gonna cost a whole hell of a lot more.
Damn.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve the request of the Public Works Director to increase the bidding and construction phase, engineering and budget. That's the wrong one. Damn. Well, go for Bob. The internet here is slow tonight, and it's not,
Mr. Chairman, request of the Public Works Director for discussion and action on the proposed next steps for the Branch Lake Dam evaluation. Move to approve that as presented.
Second.
That one?
That's what the motion.
yeah, but we need the amount.
Yeah. well,
170.
175,000, not to exceed 175,000.
Funding coming from bond proceeds.
Yeah, what he said.
So,
Amended
just,
the motion.
so I don't get in further trouble this evening, did you capture that in its entirety? And Counselor Kaplan, you're good with the motion in terms of accepting it with the dollar amount that's been presented? It's in the motion. Is there a second?
Yes.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Item 16, discussion and potential action on charter revision, potential creation of a charter commission and amendments. I sponsored this item. I'll just quickly say that this is, by charter, the council is responsible every 10 years to take action of some form, whether it's no action, forming a charter commission, et cetera. And I think, given the nature of it, I think it was 2010, 2011 was the last time that the charter was, there was an actual commission and was looked at. So I think we need to take action. I would prefer, personally, of having all councilors here, because I think it's a big item for the city, and I think out of fairness for everyone that should happen. So my suggestion is that we just table the item and bring it back to next month's council meeting, give everybody time to read the charter and understand and develop from that. So that's just my
Do
two
we have to
cents.
vote to table?
Is what?
Do we have to vote to table?
Yes, there would be a motion.
So should we wait for Mr.
Yeah,
Blanchard to return?
we should definitely wait. But if there are other comments, by all means.
Well, from staff's perspective, we have identified some charter issues. So I would strongly encourage the council to consider a full charter review so that some potential changes can be made based on staff's input.
And if we do table it, could city staff send out to the council the description of what the charter commission looks like? Because it's a very different process in terms of how it plays out, how the group is formed, who participates, the voting process, going back to the community, all of that. It's quite a process, and just want to make sure that everybody has complete understanding of it.
Yep, I can do that.
So Councilor Blanchard, when I introduced the topic, we haven't reviewed as a council in terms of the charter for within that 10-year period. And my recommendation was, since two councilors are absent this evening, to just have it tabled, and we'll put it on next month's agenda, because I think it's personally, it's a big item that everybody should have a chance to weigh in on.
Yep.
So that's where we're at with the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, move to table item number 16 until all councilors are present.
A motion?
Second.
All those in favor of tabling the item? All those opposed? Motion passes. Item is tabled. Item 17, discussion and potential action to repeal the solar moratorium effective 8/1/22, sponsored by Councilor Halloran.
Mr. Linehan had asked me to sponsor this, so if he could speak to his
Sure.
cause.
John Linehan, resident of 157 Shore Road here in Ellsworth. Good evening, councilors. As you know, I've been coming to most of I think all of the council meetings over the last several months, and I'm concerned about a couple areas. When it comes to the solar moratorium, I think it's just one example of how, as a city, we're leaning towards too many regulations within our city. I'm a free enterprise, more of a guy that's less regulations, and I think the moratorium has created some problems in the community. I don't think intentionally, but I think that has been the end result. There was supposed to be a representative here from the Main Coast Mall. I'm a tenant at the Main Coast Mall. I have my Constitutional Hall out there. When I moved into the hall, it had some leaks in the roof, and they were planning on putting a new roof on there. And there was some confusion on their end of it about whether anything to do with solar, there were moratoriums on it. So I contacted Councilor Halloran, and I believe he talked to other members of the council and said, well, that wouldn't be one of the things that's on a moratorium. It is okay to put a roof in there. So I've relayed that to the Main Coast Mall, and they're in the process of going forward with that particular procedure. But they also is another part of their request that they would like to have. I'm not speaking for them. These are just things I've come up with as I've been involved with them. And they're concerned, and I'm concerned as well, that the city has a solar capacity here, but they put a moratorium on when there's other private taxpayers and private businesses and others also have desires to do the same thing. And I don't think that's a fair situation to have the city move forward in that when we've prohibited other private enterprises and other private businesses from going forward. The other thing, so I'm concerned about the regulation being in place, number one. And then I think it was 1 or 2 meetings ago, I was at a council meeting, and it was brought up that they wanted to extend the moratorium. And I just, as just an innocent bystander listening there, and they asked what had happened on the moratorium, and the answer was nothing had happened on the moratorium, and all the time it's been in place. And I think it was wrong to have the moratorium in place, number one, but secondly, to extend it when there's been nothing done, on the moratorium and what the research was supposed to be done, I think puts an undue burden on private businesses in the area. I'm one that's always been a business background, and I'd like to think that there's a friendliness towards private business in this community. I think that's the type of thing I know, and again, I don't want to speak for them all, but I know from talking with them and my dealings with them as a tenant out there, they're concerned that they've been mistreated as a large taxpayer in the city in those couple areas like that. So I'm here to request from my own personal needs as a tenant out there. When there's a bad rainstorm, the winds are wrong direction, I have leaks, I have to re-clean the auditorium, and it could be prevented with a new roof. And I think now it's gone on so long, they will really want to do it before the poor winter. And as we've heard already, it's hard getting contractors and people to do work right now. So they're concerned, I'm concerned that we're going into another winter with a bad roof out there, which I think we can put one big step towards it would be to remove the moratorium, free their hands and let them go to work on the roof, and also other projects of installing another solar plant in the area. So for that, I request that the moratorium be ended immediately. Humbly request that we do that.
So just a couple of clarifications.
Sure.
One, all the business needed to do was to contact city staff to ask the question, and they would have had the answer around what the moratorium was about, because it was very clear that it was solar farms. Two, and we've addressed this before, but I just want the public to really understand this, because misperceptions get created by statements, and that is that the city had entered into an agreement to benefit from a solar farm. Absolutely true. When the moratorium was put into place, it was done so allowing grandfathering every project that was before the planning board. There were no other projects. This is a lengthy process. It doesn't just happen overnight. There's state involvement. There's a big significant process. So the council, when the council voted for that, was very mindful of those businesses that had already started the process, and it could have been just starting the process of they filed the paperwork. It didn't have to have the planning. It was mindful of that. I agree that it hasn't moved fast enough, but the other part too is solar farms are a new entity. This is new for the whole country, and it's taking up a lot of energy and effort in terms of how does that impact on a community. I think it's beneficial for the community to have a say in that, and that's why we have a workshop next week. Is it moving as fast as everybody would like? Probably not. But does it allow for participation by the community and not just 7 members of the community? Absolutely, and that's what the intent of the moratorium was. It wasn't to say one way or the other whether we should have a permanent moratorium or ordinance that prevented it. It was to give the community a time to say, what do we want with this new technology? Because this is big. And in communities across this state and every other state, there are ordinances and moratoriums in place as communities figure that out. I think that's a good thing. And it was never intended to say, well, the city will benefit and we will be opposed to businesses. absolutely not the truth. And I think there's some responsibility if people have misperceptions, misunderstanding. It's not the role of the council. If somebody had called me and said that, I would have said, talk to city staff. They will tell you exactly what the ordinance says, and they would get the opinion from an attorney. That's all it takes.
Yes,
It doesn't take a moratorium for us to overturn that, to get that solar on that building.
Right, and I think I stated that. I just found out as a tenant, because I was kind of asking, when is my roof going to be fixed? And they said, well, we can't with this idea. So that's when I went and inquired for them, but they were under the misunderstanding. So I just went back and relayed it to them. But still, there's another aspect, it's the timing of it. And I think, government moves a lot slower than business, which is unfortunate. And I think that's a problem with government at all levels like that. But I believe in this case, it is hindering people in our community and business people from going forward and doing that. So I would request that the moratorium be removed immediately. I just don't see the need for it.
Mr. Chairman, by statute, we just can't end the moratorium on any given date willy-nilly. We have state laws to go by. This has to go through to its end that was set in place originally. And I'd move to table this item indefinitely because of that reason. And furthermore, John, what is the connection between the Main Coast Mall fixing their roof and the solar moratorium? I fail
They
to
have other
understand.
plans. They have other plans to do other things as well like that. It's not my place to present what other plans and other people in the community have.
Well, you're presenting it that they can't fix their roof because of something that we're doing.
I presented it very clearly. They had a misunderstanding, and I had it cleared up with Councilor Halloran on that. But to even put something out there that would create a roadblock, if you will, from a misunderstanding, that to me was unnecessary. I don't think it should have been done.
Councilor Wade, did
So
you
let's
make a
correct it.
motion?
I'd like to see it
Yes.
corrected.
So you made
Yes,
to table.
yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to table. All those in favor? All those opposed?
I don't know if we can take action legally.
We can't,
Right.
at this point, we can't, a motion to table doesn't allow for discussion, so we have to at least
Right.
vote for that, so, how do you want to vote? For, against, or abstain?
Well, since we can't repeal statutorily, I'm gonna have to vote for tabling.
So the motion passes, the item is tabled. Item 18, presentation by, do you want, we'll take a quick break.
Do we insert Jeopardy music here?
You can hum, whatever.
Do you want to pass those out next Monday night? The cruiser bid?
Yeah, if you turn them. Well, no, you can hang on to them.
Councilor Hamilton,
if you want. If you
how
wanna
is
review it.
18 worded? Could you read that for me right there?
It says presentation by John Linehan and or Associates on Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and Agenda 2050.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know whether
Thank you.
Councilor Harrell was.
It's
doing
sponsored
it.
by Councilor Hill.
Okay.
You want it back?
If you want to give it back, if you want to keep it, just bring it back on Monday.
Please understand, I didn't mean to throw that at you. I was trying to get it to you.
Well, I was gonna put mine in the form of paper airplane and send it to you. Here, I'll let you hold it until Monday.
Okay.
All right. Item 18, presentation by John Linehan and or Associates on Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and Agenda 2050. This is sponsored by Councilor O'Halloran.
I'd like to speak to that a little bit. Mr. Linehan asked me to sponsor that, and I'm all for education. We heard from Ellsworth Green Party at length a month or two ago, and so I'd like to hear the other side if I could.
Really, I wanted to bring it up for education tonight. I don't plan on taking a long time tonight like that. I believe there is a 2030 agenda. How many on the council are familiar with Agenda 2030 from the United Nations? Okay. So not many of you are familiar with that. And I think it's something that you really should take a look at. I'm an America First, Maine First, Ellsworth First person. And I think Agenda 2030, which is, if you go to the United Nations website, you can check it out in much detail on there, works against the constitutional values that our nation was founded upon like that. And I think that the things that are happening in our country right now, a lot of it is because of on purpose. I think it's an agenda that's being put forward there. It's part of a one world plan to defeat America, to put America in a bad situation going forward. And I just really want you to be aware of it. Like my purpose tonight is to make you aware of what there is in Agenda 2030. There was an Agenda 2021, it's evolved into 2030, there's also an Agenda 2050. There's stated sustainable development goals in there that I believe are harmful to our country, harmful to our state, and harmful to our city. So I would just appreciate it if as a council you would take a look at it. And I'd like to see it discussed at a previous time when you've had time to look at it like that. I know Councilor Kaplan, because I've talked with her about it, is very familiar with it. I don't know if she wants to mention anything tonight. I'm not trying to belabor it. You guys have had a long meeting tonight, but I'm really just trying to make you aware of what's going on out there. I think our country's at risk, our republic is at risk. I've watched things for a long time. For 50 years, I've been involved with a lot of things globally, watching what's going on. And I believe our republic is teetering right now, whether it's going to go forward because partially of the Agenda 2030 agenda. So I just want people aware of it because the decisions we make really are for the future. At my age, to be honest with you, I can hunker down and survive it. But I have children and grandchildren, so I want to leave them with a country that's founded on constitutional, biblical principles 246 years ago. So that's my purpose tonight, to put it out there, and hopefully you just kind of study up on it. Maybe we could have I'll try to get it on the agenda when we can discuss it in a little bit more detail.
Councilor Kaplan?
I think it would be wise as a council just to have a session where we can discuss the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Not all of them are bad. I mean, everybody wants clean water. Who doesn't? We were just talking about the dam. Who doesn't want clean water? Everybody wants renewable energy if possible. But is it plausible at this time? Everybody wants a clean environment. But there's other goals in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that do put even our interests locally at risk. It's in the design of the agenda. It specifically states, and I think it was Maurice Strong that wrote in the agenda, that the middle-class lifestyle is not, the American middle-class lifestyle is not sustainable. The fact that we have appliances, that we eat meat, that we have private property rights is not sustainable. It also, there was one person that said specifically that private property rights, ownership of private property, is not sustainable and would specifically jeopardize the goals of Agenda 2030. Locally, I mean, if you think of us as global citizens, that's all well and good. But every taxpayer in Ellsworth has private property. So how do they plan to implement something like that here? Well, zoning laws, ordinances, things that start to restrict your use of the private property so that you can still be at your property, but you can't fully utilize your property. And so I think that if we had an education session looking at the good points of Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and Agenda 2050, and the things that may not be so good for us locally. At least the public would know, because most people don't know about this plan. And I'm telling you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Everybody wants equality. I've always said I am all for equality, but this plan specifically talks about global equity. And it specifically states the only way to have global equity is to reduce the American standard of living by redistributing wealth from first world nations to third world nations through taxation and other things. Okay, but you can't have global equity and end all poverty globally. It's an ideal goal. Nobody wants to see poor people, but you can't equalize the standard of living for everyone on the planet without taking from one and giving to another, which is the Robin Hood economic theory. The person who his name begins with a G, but he actually wrote Agenda 20, the initial design for Agenda 21. He's also was at the time the head of the Global Socialist Party. It's the Gumacher Group, or let's see, I think I probably have his name.
So, Council, what are you looking at?
I would just like to have us have an open discussion on it, to
Well-
educate each other.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, is if you give some thought in terms of what that would look like, in what form, whether it's a council meeting or
Like a
outside of
workshop.
a workshop or something.
Yeah, just a workshop, so that everybody knows what it is. Educate yourself. You can download Agenda 2030. You know, I mean, there's some conspiracy theories out there, I will say that. But if you look at it from a moderate perspective, not everything about it's bad, but there are some scary components. Like trying to, I'm sorry, I like bacon, I don't want them to take away bacon, you know? Like, there's other parts of it where they want to eliminate the meat diet globally. You can't do that.
Yes, you can.
Well, you can do that because you like kale, but
So-
I don't.
So can you, maybe at a future meeting, you can come back with a proposal in terms of, for us to
Yeah, I
do
think that we should look at a workshop.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah,
Councilor?
I told Councilor Hanson, since she couldn't be here tonight, that I would read any emails she would like to share with us, and she has sent one, so I'm going to read it. Regarding the presentation by Mr. Linehan, I had not heard of Agenda 21 until joining the City Council, but have done some reading about it since then. It is a well-recognized conspiracy theory, and my initial inclination is to ignore conspiracy theories. However, my worry is that hysteria about this invented problem could get in the way of dealing with very real challenges we face. We are in a time of great transition and upheaval between the COVID pandemic, disruption in the workforce, economic changes that come with inflation, and the effects of climate change. In order to face these challenges, we need to be able to work together to find real solutions and not be distracted by imaginary threats, as this is the third time that this conspiracy has been raised by city councilors. It is clear that we must confront it and point out the distraction that the falsehood presents to the serious business of serving our citizens. That's from Councilor Hanson.
Well, again, my goal was to bring it to everybody's attention so you guys could look at it for yourself. I'm of the totally opposite view of Councilor Hanson, and, you know, I think you look at it. I mean, I've read it through many times myself, and I'd like to have you guys take a look at it. I appreciate Councilor Camplin setting up a workshop so you can review it. The facts are what the facts are. Take a look at it.
I might add, just go to the United Nations website.
It's right
It's
on the
on the
website.
front page.
Yep.
You can actually download the United Nations Department of Environmental Sustainable Action. It's all about how much we've progressed on Agenda 21. And it gives updates. They have workshops. You can watch All of the leaders, 192 nations signed on to this. It's not a conspiracy theory for the last time. It's on the United Nations website.
So everybody can go to that and make their opinion.
Yes.
before we-
198 nations, not 192.
So before we finish with 19, just a couple wrap-up items. Don't leave, we have several, oh, no, you, don't leave because we have some licenses we need to sign. And just a quick reminder, that we've decided, and I'm going to add an item, that we're having a special meeting next Monday at 6 PM prior to the solar workshop, solar moratorium workshop. That special meeting will include the police cruiser purchase request, and the second one is the formation of a public safety committee to look at appropriate space for our public safety staff. So if you have an interest, just be prepared to volunteer to be on that, and we'll form that committee next Monday.
Now, does that special meeting, that doesn't require the standard notice?
No.
Okay, just,
I'll make it tonight and we'll go up to the meeting.
okay.
Item 19.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?